Let's start. So good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. We know that the weather today is a bit difficult, but I think it's only right to, listen about Baghdad and feel a bit warmer. So in this way, the weather and the topic of the lecture is quite fitting. We welcome everyone to join, but we will just start so that not to postpone it too much. We will also have participants online. So I want to welcome all of you here, but also our participants online in Baghdad and other places in the world. So I'm very happy that we could be today here for this event. And this event is part of the joint research project that we conduct between the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology, Polish Academy of Science, and the University of Baghdad. The project is titled Made in Iraq, Urban Planning, Reconstruction and Change under International Sanctions. And this project deals with the urban and architectural changes that happened in Baghdad from 1980s, when Iraq was still quite an affluent country full of international experts, international construction projects and urban planners, to 1990s, where after the invasion of Kuwait, Iraq found itself under international sanctions and had to rely on Iraqi experts. So we are interested in how this change impacted the city itself. And there are four members of this research team. Myself, I'm Dorota Woroniecka, Aleksandra Wojtaszek. We are both from the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology, Polish Academy of Sciences, and Professor Ghada Slik and Rahat Fadel from the University of Baghdad. And we are very happy that we were able to welcome them in Warsaw. They came for a project workshop for 1 week. So we have 1 week of workshop, behind us. And as a, final event of this visit, we have the pleasure today to listen to the lecture by our colleague, Professor Rada Silk. The only last thing that I wanted to say is that the research project is funded by the National Science Center and implemented here at the Institute. So first, maybe short bio about our speaker today. So Professor Rada Silik. And I'm also very happy because not only she's my great friend, but also a great colleague from the University of Baghdad. She was the former head of the Department of Architecture at the University of Baghdad, College of Engineering. She authored a book, City of Stories, and numerous research articles on Baghdad. She's the real institution when it comes to study of history of architecture and urban planning of Baghdad. She's also a founder and chair of Iraq Docomomo International, and founding member of the Makia Foundation for the Development of Baghdad. And parallel to her academic work, Professor Asilk also has a vast experience in different advisory roles to different Iraqi public institutions, including the Mayoralty of Baghdad, National Investment Commission, Ministries of Municipalities and Higher Education, and many other. And also in recognition of her service to the discipline, in 2013, she received the Tamayus Woman in Architecture and Construction Award. And also today we have a double pleasure because we also have with us today Professor Mirosława Czerny from the Faculty of Geography and Regional Studies, University of Warsaw. So I will also take the liberty of introducing Professor Czerny, who will give the commentary to after Professor Rada's lecture. She's also a former head of the Institute of Regional and Global Studies. and currently the director of social sciences doctoral school at the University of Warsaw. And Professor Czerny's research projects focus on urban and regional development and include topics such as urban development, poverty, sustainable development of rural areas, or political aspects of spatial changes, with the geographical focus of Latin America. So it is also the comparative aspect that it's interesting here. And she published over 36 books and 200 articles. So I will not get into them all, and worked as researcher and lecturer at many universities in Latin America and in Europe. So this is all from me. Again, thank you for coming, and I will now give the floor to Professor Ghada for the lecture on the urban growth of contemporary Baghdad and its architecture. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dorota, for the introduction. First, I have to say that I'm thankful for the Polish Academy of Science, for the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology for inviting us. I'm also proud to be one of the project that you heard about, our project about Baghdad city. And also, I have the pleasure to be here because, as I am going to mention here, when I'm going to talk about contemporary Baghdad and modern Baghdad planning, that maybe you don't know, or I think you don't know, that Poland has its very high impact on the city of Baghdad in regard to planning, and we can see now how it is. So I'm very glad to be here in Poland to talk about the city of Baghdad. That's my city. So maybe you know Baghdad as city, the Islamic city, and also the city. Yeah, but the city of Baghdad, I have to start. This is to the left. This is the modern map of the city of Baghdad with the Tigris River coming in it. And to the right, this is the governorate of Baghdad, a small governorate in the middle of Iraq. And this is the Baghdad city with its periphery. Okay, so Baghdad officially was built in the 700 to 706. But before that, as you can see in Mesopotamian area, where the city of Baghdad there, the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, come to their closest space between them. And somehow the people of Mesopotamia could recognize that the valley of the Euphrates is a little bit higher. So there was several canals coming from one river to the other. So in the map to the bottom, you can see that there was an Akkadian kingdom called Ishtuna, that is what the Mesopotamian kingdom, but Baghdad city was somehow part of it. The picture to the right, you can see that there are two sides in Baghdad, in modern Baghdad city, that are related to the older Mesopotamian side. So here we see what I was talking about the two rivers having smaller rivers between them, and you can see in the picture the site of Baghdad here in little bit modern times. So in the city of Baghdad, the ancient, the pre-Islamic era, there was this Mesopotamian culture. And of course, to the right, we can see the theory of Pythagoras. It was there in Baghdad 1,000 years before Pythagoras. And to the left, you can see this instrument, which after analyzing it, it was discovered that it was a battery. So that was also the first battery in history. Now we come to the site of the city. In the very first AD centuries, this site was a very agricultural site with certain villages. And at that time, all Iraq cities were Christian. So there was the villages and also monasteries all over the area of Baghdad. And in the beginning of the Islamic era, in the second house ruling Iraq or the Islamic Caliphate, the Caliph al-Mansur decided to build the capital in this area, where it is a very good agricultural area and it is between the two rivers. So the both rivers will be like defense places for the city. And he chose a place where you can see it, an round area to have his capital. Actually is not the capital, but the center of the big city. Can you all move the slide? So during this Abbasid area, starting from 766, we can see the round city, but also we can see that the whole area is not the round city, but very wider than that. And all the palaces were outside, but the round city was almost the center of the government. Okay, Ola, okay. So in Baghdad, where there was the main shrines of the main Islamic imams. The one to the left is Abi Hanifa. He was the imam of the main Sunni sect. And to the right is Al-Hussein shrine. Sorry, it's the Al-Kadhim shrine. That is also one of the sects of the imam of the Shia sect. Okay. Afterwards, in about 100 years, the city moved from the left side of the river to the other side of the river. And the palace formed was like the new urban center there. And it grew to the north and to the west and to the east as a new city. It was very natural because the first one was away from the river. And here we come to the best site that a city can grow and still continue in history. These are the buildings that still remain from that Abbasid features. Okay. And here I just wanted to show some stages of the city, starting number one. This is a Mesopotamian site. Number two is also a Mesopotamian area. Number three is the round city. Number four is the growth of the south of round city. Number five is the growth of the area called Adamia now. Number six, the area called Kadabia now. Number seven is the wall city and the new urban center, all on the map of the city of modern Baghdad. And this is the city as remained during the Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate fell under the Mongol attacks in 1258. So after that, Baghdad went under one occupation till the other, first by the Mongols, then by the Turks, and after that by the Persian, and later on by the Ottomans. So here we can see this is Baghdad, and during the 17th century, it was under the Ottomans' occupation. But during these areas, these periods of times, there were also certain buildings to be built and also some features of these periods. These are some of the images that were drawn by travelers about the city of Baghdad and how it looked during the 18th century. Well, the main remaining thing of all these 100 years is the urban fabric setting, where we have the organic alleys and where we have this type of inward-looking house with the opening of the court in the middle of it, and the very narrow and shaded during to Iraqi dry hot weather, and the very shaded alleys, which formed a good solution in weather-wise and also in social-wise. You can see the image of the city at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, the fabric with the inward courts. And also you can see a building that is the main site of the Ottoman government and also a site for the Ottoman military troops. But also you can see that this was at the end of the 19th century, and Iraq went through the First World War, where it was under the Ottoman occupation, but during the end of it, before the end of it, in 1917s, the British troops came to Baghdad. Can show the other slide, and went into under the British occupation from 1917 till 1921. In 1921, there was the crowning of King Faisal I to be the first king of Iraq, but under the British mandate till 1932. In this time, oil was found in Iraq, and all people thought that this is the promise of the young state formed in 1922 to start its new history. The beginning of the 20th century, starting from 1921, there was no Iraqi architects. There was also the craftsmanship, but we had the British architect working in Iraq, and they brought some of the classic features of not only England, but what they were occupying also in India. And those also were combined with the Iraqi traditional building crafts. So here we can see the growth of the city of Baghdad. Go back to the, okay. Okay. What are you doing? So in the middle, the city of Baghdad, and then there was those small cities of Adamiya and Kadamiya. Also, though, as I said, there are two main religious cities, but they were separated from the city of Baghdad. And we can start seeing the growth of the city all along the river. Okay. And this is the map of 1929, where the first road started to grow from inside the city to outside the city. And this is the city as we see it in the 1929, with new streets cut in the all urban fabric. Then the city started to grow. To the left, you can see the image of the horizontal urban fabric of the city, and with only the start of growing a little bit outer than the historical borders. And to the right, we can see the first famous street that was cut in the traditional fabric that's called Rashid Street. And these buildings here, the three of them, the one to the left below is the main and the first airport, built by British also. To the right, the School of Medicine, built by the British. And then King Faisal died, and there was a cemetery built for him also by the British. So the main architectural features at that time were really some kind of a mixture between some classics, some European classics, some Art Nouveau, and some of the what was brought from India, beside the Iraqi traditional features. But then, of course, at the beginning, there were no Iraqi architects. So there was some position called the government architects. They were all British, Wilson, Mason, and Cooper. But the first Iraqi formal architect was Ahmed Mukhtar Ibrahim. He was the first one to take the GA position, and he designed a building that was in 1940, but we can see that it has the modern feature. Okay, hold on. So here we see the city with this very old districts. And this changed totally during the modern time. We don't have these districts anymore, but we have there's only traces in the historic area. And we can see here the growth from the 20s till the 50s and how the old city grew to the north and to the south. We can see also the river. And this is the city in 1944, and you cannot distinguish the historical part of it, but it grew to the north and to the south. So also in the 19th, this is 1905, it's 50s, we have also the continuity of what we saw in the 40s, but in the same time, it was the start of modernity in Iraq. So at that time, the government also wanted some foreign architects to work in Iraq. So they re-invited Cooper, for example, the British one, to work and to do some buildings. Among them was the presidential palace, and here's the old parliament building. But, okay, hola, okay, this is the city as it grew in the 50s. And we had the first master plan of the city in 1956 by also British planners, de Monoplio and Spencer. And this was the border of the city, as you can see. And you can see that all these districts were gridiron districts, which grew out of the historic borders. And there were so many new projects. There was, in the 50s, some growth in the income of the oil in Iraq. So there was some kind of a construction board to be formed, and the construction board development did a lot of new projects, among them the new bridges. In 1952, the young King Faisal II was crowned. And we can see the features of modernity in Iraq, the modern buildings, the modern streets, the modern features of the people and their clothing. And to the left, you can see the poet, Iraqi poet, Badr Shakir Sayyad. He invented a new line of all Arab poetry called the modern Arab poetry. And start of the but because the city was inviting some architects from Britain and other places, there was some suggestion by Iraqi new architects. If you are inviting architects from the world, why not invite the international non-architects? So Le Corbusier was invited to do a project in Baghdad. He did an Olympic village, but the only building that was implemented is the gymnasium. You can see here, it was implemented in the 70s, designed already in the end of the 50s. Okay? And the architect, José Luis Sert, was invited not by the Iraqi government, but by the American embassy to do the campus of the American embassy in the 50s. Gropius was invited to design the campus of the University of Baghdad. And you can see him here standing in front of the tower building. That is the main building, administrative building of the University of Baghdad. Here, the University of Baghdad to the right, you can see that he adopted unique concept in it. He managed to have some entrance, very unique entrance, leading to a mosque as a kind of symbolic feature representing the spiritual. And then from that, you go to the central scientific area representing science and life. And the Greek planner Doxiadis was invited to do some housing complex in Iraq. He actually did a lot of housing in Iraq. He almost did the main planning of each new districts, not only in Baghdad, but in other Iraqi cities as well. In 1958, there was a revolution against the monarchy in Iraq, and there come the Republic of Iraq with its leader to the right. And then you can see people are greeting them to the left. And here, there was some kind of a change between the previous kind of rule and to moving to the communist side or the communist aspect of ruling. And this is one of the features that the unknown soldier monument that was built by Iraqi architects, Rafat Chadarchi. Oh, well, unfortunately, that was demolished later because I'm going to just mention it a little bit. Abdul Karim Qasim, the first president, when Saddam came later on, he was his enemy. So he tried to demolish everything that Abdul Karim Qasim built in Baghdad. But the main remaining thing, that is this kind of liberty monument. It was totally designed by the artist Jawad Salim. This is like a story. You can just, I'm gonna mention a little bit. It's a story coming from the right to the left. This is before the revolution, and this is a soldier representing the revolution, and there is the future after the revolution. So we have the modern city, but we also had the first migration from the rural areas. You can see in the picture that people coming from the country, bringing their animals, bringing the rural features with them to the city. So that was, in that time, this was a decision to build a very new district outside the city, very big, to house these people. And this is the district that was called Thawra City. Now it's called Sadr City. Very horizontal, very gridiron, very compact city. This is the main feature of the center of the city of Baghdad with the monument and also with the very unique building built by Iraqi architect Jafar Alawi. And this square was changed a little bit later on. Now we come to the contemporary Baghdad. As you have seen in the poster, the picture of the mayoralty of Baghdad. This is the same building. And this is the main, actually the topic, but that was an introduction, a little bit introduction of the history of the city. So in 1968, the government started to ask planners from Poland to come to do the new master plan for the city of Baghdad. So the Miastoprojekt-Kraków service firm was invited to do the master plan. And you can see it here. It was the master plan of 1973, started in 1968, but the master final version in 1973. And this was done by planners from Poland. I have to say something. In the 80s, there was another master plan to be done. It was done totally by the Japanese firm JCCR, but at the time of its approval in 1990, there was the war of occupation Kuwait, and it was not approved. So dating to 1973, it was the only master plan going on till now in Baghdad, although of all the changes. So one of the features of this master plan and the previous master plan by the British, that the city will grow horizontally. Each person or each family in Baghdad has its own house on the ground. And there was a law started from the 1930s that these plots were go between 600, 700 meters to 300 meters. And only in the crowded area in the suburbs, it was allowed of less than this. So you can see everybody is living in a large house with garden, with garage. This was the feature of the city in the 70s and also in the 80s. In this time, there was of course, the people, the international, the Americans, and also the French left Iraq, but also the Republic of Iraq wanted to encourage the Iraqis to take their role in the architecture of the city. So there was first the establishment of my department, Department of Architecture, to study the Iraqi way of building and to focus on some kind of a target, how to create a modern, contemporary Iraqi architecture that is related and continuous with all the heritage of the city. So Iraqi architects started to work in the 60s, and we can see here some of their experimental buildings of how to combine the tradition with the contemporary. Main architect of Chatterjee, here we can see down here to the left, building by here. Also, only to the left, to the right side, all these buildings were either in the 60s or the 70s, and some of them were implemented in the early 80s. And this is the Mustansariya University, very unique building, very unique campus, where Kaftan Auni tried to mix some of the Iraqi traditional features with some weather treatment, with screens, and also to use them with the concrete beams that was very famous during the 50s and the 60s. The also building by Hisham here. And this is the only building that the Iraqi architect, Said Ali Madloub, tried to link the features with the previous, not the local, not the Islamic features, but the previous Mesopotamian features. This is another building by Mahmoud Al-Ali, and trying to have this, the feature of the small, as I showed you in the house, of the house these were used in the alleys. He tried it to rescale it and put it in a multi-story building. Other buildings were being done during the 80s, but the 80s started with another invitation to international firms to come to have projects in Iraq. As I said, the demolition of the old monument and the start of underpass of this very unique square in the middle, and the growth of the city in the 80s. And there started some big projects. Some of them were done by TAC, the firm of Gropius, which continued to work in Iraq and were re-invited to work in Iraq. They had the projects of redevelopment of what was called Khulafa Street redevelopment. Of course, that project was stopped during the war of 1990. And now we come to the 80s, where the Japanese planners were invited, and the Japanese planners suggested some conservation maps to do and to do some rehabilitation of the old historic center. So they started diagnosing the importance of building. You can see the dark ones are the most important, coming to the lighter ones. And there were projects of housing all over the river. And this Abu Nuwas area on the river is a very unique area, but there was a big cultural project to be built. Only these features, these small houses were built out of it. Other buildings were built in the 80s. Some of them did match the historical setting of the historic and other didn't. And also a new unknown soldier monument by Iraqi artist Khalid Al-Rahal. During the 80s, there was some kind of a plan to host the conference, a big international conference in Baghdad. So there was a tent to build new and big hotels, among them this Rashid Hotel, and also some high-tech building. Another conservation plan for the shrine and the city of Kadumia. The buildings in red, those should be preserved and rehabilitated, but it was never conducted this way. Also, another historic conservation plan. Iraqi architects continued to work with their new ideas of how to combine the historic and the traditions with the new contemporary architecture. Also, a very good and a very deep study of the transportation. It was done in the 80s, combining the new railway roads and also with the new airport. The new master plan done by the Japanese decided to change what was done by the Ball service firm. Instead of the centralized districts, they decided to have commercial or spines to link the city and to start the new extension of the city. So that was their idea, but it was not totally implemented, only partially implemented. And then we come to the main projects that was implemented in the 80s, projects of housing. So I had to say that the vertical housing was only introduced in 73. So these were the project that came after 73 of a little middle rise housing. This is another project. But this one of Abu Nuwas was of 2 or 3 stories and continued the horizontal character of the city. There were so many big projects, the new Iraqi parliament and the conference palace, but the conference palace, was turned to another use again later on, and a new martyr monument. In the 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, occupied it, and a result of that, there was a war and there was a bombing for the city for over 40 days. And this bombing destroyed mostly everything, every bridge and every governmental building. You can see here the destruction of the main bridges. So in the start of the 90s, the thing that was going on in the city was only the reconstruction of what was destroyed. But of course, it was not implemented in the same way, because at that time, Iraq was under sanctions. So it wasn't easy for Iraqis to reconstruct this project, but they did some kind of recycling things, and they implemented and they chose from one project to other just to continue the construction of these bridges and the main infrastructure. But in the end of the 90s, this, of course, the construction was done. So the government or Saddam regime started to build very large mosques and also palaces. This mosque, the previous one, is still as it is. It was never completed. Yet another big mosque, which we are studying it now in one of our research, this was also being done by the government or by Saddam at the end of the 90s. You can see this image is from the war of 2003. It was bombed, but the columns are still there till now. And this is another mosque that was built as a model for the first one. It is completed, but also this is an image from the war of 2003. This is a palace built by Saddam. He wanted some palace as 1009 looking features. So also this is the image when it was bombed in the war of 2003. This is the general view of the city, how it was in the 80s and the 90s. There was no big projects in the 90s except building the mosque and the palaces, but there was this only one simple, small housing project, also horizontal, because the strategy was then that we will go to the compact horizontal housing of the city and to have it again as the main features of the city. In 2003, there was just another bombing of the city. So it was now another destruction by the bombing and destruction by afterwards. There was insecurity. There was some kind of terrorism and there was some explosions beside the bombing. So the main thing that was done after 2003, that to reconstruct the main buildings. But the security was not full, it was unstable. So the city was almost covered by these concrete blast walls to avoid the violence between one district and another, because there was some kind of a civil war between sectarian civil war, and also to protect certain buildings. And after that, the insecurity and also the instability and the change from the communist ruling dictatorship to the more what was supposed to be the democratic era led to certain not controlled features of the city. First, we saw that they were changing the coloring of the city. And now we see the neglect of the historic areas and the changing of feature. For example, this one in the very historic street. And that was what was left of a historic house. And here's the historic house was changed totally. Coloring modernist building. Adding to the old historic buildings. And also the explosion went on till 2012. This is the street, it's called Mutanabbi Street. It is the main cultural street in Iraq. So this was the blast, but fortunately it was reconstructed in 2 years. But here we come to new projects. The new projects was the development projects of the religious city of Kadamiyya. This was the winning project of the competition of the development of Kadamiyya, but it was not implemented. And there was a new master plan that was being held by planners from Lebanon and also Iraqis. That was the target date was 2030. This plan is it, but it's not completely approved. So we are, as formal plan, as a formal master plan, we have the old 73 master plan of all service. So the new land use, the extension of the city, and also because the city grew so much, it all covered the older green belt. So a suggestion of a new green belt. This is a huge size of a city that is, because their calculations are not statistically precise, the assumption is the city holds now 10 million people. And there are suggestions of new, now what is called the satellite cities that are just on the suburbs of the main city. New artwork are being done in Baghdad. This artwork is representing that, the cone represent the history starting from Mesopotamian time till now. And the hand that is with 5 fingers is trying to protect it from collapsing, because what happening during the 30 years, the last 30 years was just destruction and the collapse. We were featuring the collapse of culture. This is a new architecture project for the Council of Building Ministries, and it features the infinity. It is also inspired by Mesopotamian symbol of the infinity. Infinity is the continuity in the history and also in continuity of culture. This building is being now started to build it. And there is a competition for the new Iraqi parliament building. This is the winning project. It's a project that was designed by a British firm. The idea is that as it a parliament, so it is representing through its features the old urban fabric. But here it represents not the urban fabric, but the people who were living in that urban fabric as the Iraqi people with all their sects, with the center of this, the main hall of the parliament. This is the second prize. This also went to, this is an Iraqi architect who could combine the sum of the features of Mesopotamian architecture with some of the later Islamic architecture in a new building. And the third prize went to the Iraqi-born architect Zaha Hadid. And the decision was not to implement the first one, not to implement the second one, but to go for building the third prize winner. And finally, through this long trip of occupation, liberty, communism, leaving communism, destruction in one war, terrorism, rebuilding, and rebuilding again, we are still having a hope. This is the main entrance of the University of Baghdad. It was built, as I said, by Gropius. So in the arch, there is an opening, and this opening symbolizes that the human mind, science is not limited. So it's not limited by the arch, it's open. But now we are giving it another symbol, that our history is continuous and we still have this opening of hope. Thank you.
Well, yes. So thank you very much, Professor Ghada, for taking us on the trip throughout the modern history of Baghdad. I will now give the floor to Professor Czerny for her commentary, and then we will have questions from the audience, of course.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the fabulous presentation, very interesting. My comments are very, very short because I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions because of the very interesting presentation. What can I see? Well, what can I say? That the urban space, urban territory, the structure, function, divisions are the subject of research in of many disciplines. We have architecture, urbanism, sociology, geography. I'm a geographer and I'm interested in urban geography, in model of the cities. And within urban geography, I studied the spatial structure of city in the global south, mainly Latin America, but I know I am familiar with researching cities in other parts of the world. The cities of Middle East have been the subject of many, many studies, not only British and French, but as well German. Especially in the end of the 20th century, it was a lot of publications of German urban geographers. They worked in different cities, countries of Middle East. And if you're interested in models of urban spaces, I think the School of German urban geography is the best examples of such studies. The models of the spatial structure of the cities were created first by Tehran and Damascus. And I'm expecting here the similarity between Baghdad and such a model, but I think they are not. Not absolutely. There's another space of Baghdad and the organization of this space, because I don't see here a typical elements of Islamic city. And I think the traditional models of Orient cities, they have this polarization of two spaces, the Islamic space and European or semi-European space. And here I can see it, but perhaps you can do a comment. Okay, the example of Baghdad is interesting because of the city form and mix of the functions, I think. And of course, the influence was influenced by reconstruction, modernization, wars, plans, migration, and so on and so on. And the task of analyzing this process is difficult and multi-phases, I think. To compare such model of Baghdad and the factors of the creation of the space with another cities, another towns in Middle East. And I see here the most interesting research question, you know, and of course, therefore, research experience and help for the project you are doing there is very important, and I think you can make the suggestions of a lot of aspects of this urban model. Thank you.
I have to say that the start of the city is different. Here we see at this time, Baghdad was the capital of a kingdom from China to Spain, this big. So the decision was to make a city that can rule this great kingdom. So here, the decision was not, it was not a growth of a city that gradually grew from small settlement to a bigger one. No, there was here a political decision to build a city. And to build a city, if you go, because I tried not to focus on the historical period, but it was not a city. It was like a fortress with the center of the palace. And then the whole area was to be given to the military. So you can see it was not a gradual growth of the city, but this city here did not continue to be the capital. Why? Because of what you said, because it didn't have the real potential of the growth of a city, like the agriculture, the people, and also the interaction of people with the main spaces. Okay, so you can go through the other one here. Then, of course, this stage that you can see is like a very centralized building. And then, okay, here, what happened here? The centralized city was left to go where? To go where there were villages before in the site of the city. And one of the caliphs decided to build a palace here. And this palace became the urban center. And the city grew. And this is the city that continued for 1,000 years, not the older one. And this is the city, the historic city. It had the spaces that you talked about. It had them. But what happened in modern times, just a quick going through that. Just a quick, okay. After that. You can see, well, starts from. This is the historic city with all its spaces. And the two other small cities, Adamia and Kazmia, both of them are religious. Both of them of a religious center in the middle of them. But they were added to the city of Baghdad. But what happened after that is the start of modernity. So with the start of modernity is not like any other, for example, cities in North Africa. They kept the historic and they grew outer. Here, there was the start of cutting. You can show the other one. The after. Here was the start of cutting the urban fabric with new streets. That was the first street, then there was a parallel and a parallel. What we have now, I showed it in the conservation plan, that when the Japanese of the 80s started to work with a conservation plan for the older city, there was like bits of the older fabric. So main spaces were lost in the modern city. So we lost a lot of this urban fabric through this very cutting of the older city. But if we go now to that part, you can see what you talked about. The space and the outer space is still there. But we need to have this consciousness to rehabilitate it as it was, not to change it in a very modern way. Okay.
Okay. So now I think we'll invite questions from the audience, because we also have questions, I think many questions online, but let's start with people present here, and we need to use the mic because otherwise people online will not hear us. So
Thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you for this journey, like a magical journey through Baghdad. I really appreciate it. I'm an urban designer myself, and I have actually 1,000 questions, but I will only ask you 2. The first question is about this horizontal city.
Yes.
Working in, let's say, of course, I never worked in Baghdad, but working in a Islamic Arabic city, we have had this understanding that there is this, let's say, original organization of houses. They call it in Central Asia, for example, the mahalla. I don't know if it comes from Arabic, probably.
Yeah.
And there is a modern architecture, and they are very different. My question would be, if these houses in the horizontal city, as you call it, what is the organization of the house? Is it towards the inside? Is it towards the outside? How does the public space look like? So this is like the first question. And the second question, I will just ask it because it's very simple. What is the role of the river today in the city? Because we haven't been talking about this, and it's very interesting how the river lives and what's the function of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Very interesting questions. The older house, the Islamic house, as you said, the traditional house was inward looking with courtyard, and the mosque is around it. And that continued from, well, early traces of this house, maybe you don't know, goes back to the city of Ur. The city of Ur to the south of Iraq, which is maybe, no, not maybe, it is 3000 BC dates. So the first traces of this inward, because in our research, we done a lot of research on the weather factors, and we could see that this inward looking house was the perfect for the hot, dry weather. And also it was perfect in social things. So what happened, this was the continuity from the Ur time till the end of the 19th century. The beginning of the 20th century, that's what continued till the 20s. But what happened? There was the British in Iraq. I mean, not only the British, that was the Western influence in Iraq. And then, so we had this change. First change was to roof this. It was still centralized, still looking to the space, but it was roofed. So it became the main hall of the house. But we started to see windows going to the outside, which weren't. Only a small garden that weren't before. And what we call this the transitional house. That was in the 30s, 40s. But from the 50s, this whole thing changed. We have these plots with a very modern, organized spaces looking to the outside. In front of the house, a garden with a garage. And then comes the spaces, the living, the guests, and the kitchen. And to the back, there are the bedrooms, 2-floor house. Okay, this is the main feature. But if you go deep in the architecture of the house, you can still see some of the traces of the traditional house. For example, there's no central space, but you can see a corridor that is separating the guest area from the living area. That was in the traditional house, separating the main area from the family area. Okay, so there was still some features, but this house with the new garden, with the modern house, became a feature and also became the character of the modern city of Baghdad. And also it was socially accepted and it had its uniqueness as a modern house. Okay, but which I didn't say, the professor asked me before the lecture, this was the feature of the city of about 4 million people. And there was a very good housing strategy in that time, I mean in the 70s, of giving each employee, started with the communist government, giving each employee of the government a plot of house and a loan to build his own house. So this raised a very good medium income stage in Iraq, okay? In the 80s and the 90s, there was no housing strategy. There was a start of a housing strategy. It was suggested by the Pole Service. Why don't you go for a multi-story housing? So they suggested few projects, and those were built. But because of the wars, it didn't continue. So what happened? If my parents got a plot in the 60s, now in the 80s, there was the sons and the daughters who grew and not having enough space for them and not having a way to have their own houses. And this continued. So the result was, why don't we split this plot of 600 meters to smaller plots? And this is what is happening now, and changing the character of the city, deleting the garden and the green space, and going to smaller and maybe not functional spaces, but in need, because the people needed that. And sorry, the second one was about the river. Yeah. So the river was the heart of the city. And if you go to the historic fabric, you could see that all the alleys are leading to the river. And the river was the main transportation canal, okay? But due to the modern, and I show it here, the first street, first modern street did not come with the traditional route to the river. It was parallel to the river. So all streets came parallel to the river. The result is that as if we are giving our view to the street and our back to the river. And we could conclude that, and we did a research, and we, as maybe when our paper will be published and our project will be published, you can see that we had in the late 90s a project of an urban master plan of Baghdad, but done by all Iraqis. And in this master plan, we started to change this, to go back and to go to give the life to the river as a central place. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. Sorry for, maybe I will not use the term because I'm not an architect or an urban designer, but when we talk, like in all our Arab capital or cities or even villages, we have this influence of, like, for example, in Lebanon, we have like the influence of some Italian architecture. You can see it now in Beirut, like some Italian architecture or French architecture, what make something named like the Orient architecture. Like this is something specific for this cities in the Arab region where there is this influence of European cities with the somehow the Islamic model. My question now, like for example, from Lebanon or in Iraq, after the war, after all like this deterioration in the idea of state, the corruption, the rise of what we call like this new contractor society who want to just build this compound for more security for this. Can we still like think that in the future, like after 10 years or after 20 years, we will still have
Features?
yeah, like we will still have this type of architecture, like
Yeah, I understand you.
okay, like for example, also one thing also is like this huge increase in the like the banlieue Dawahi around like also the cities. Like we can feel that our cities that used to be, as we saw in the photos here in the 60s and the 70s, beautiful building and all this. Now all our cities, they are turning to, you know, just an efficient cities with buildings that people are making them for maybe profit for this without taking into consideration like the beauty or like this beautiful aspects of building the spaces?
Okay. Thank you. First, I want to comment that, yes, in the late Ottoman era, in Turkey, Lebanon, in Syria, and in Iraq, there was this trend of combining some influences from French influences, from Art Deco, from Art Nouveau, with the traditional. You could see the features in the street of Beirut and Damascus, and also in Turkey and in Iraq. And that was clear. And people, craftsmen, builders, were traveling from one city to another, having these features to be built. So in Iraq, we saw it very clear in the 30s and the 40s, these influences. But everything changed because the modernity in Iraq, different from other countries in the Middle East, there was a boom in the economic. There was the money of the oil in the 50s, which started to build in a very fast way modern things. And the thing was to go to the modernity, go to the modernity. So there was a lot of modernity, and so a lot of neglect to those traditions. But modernity in Iraq had its own character, and we love it because it had its impact and did do well to the city. So the tradition has a character, and the modernity had its character. In Baghdad, it's different because in Baghdad, it was like an explosion of buildings in the 50s and 60s. It's different like what happened in Lebanon and also in Damascus and maybe in Egypt. Like what happened now, later on in the Gulf, when they found the oil and everything went so big, so big. We had this explosion in the 50s and the 60s. But you're asking now about now. Well, Iraq has its own situation going through one war to the other. But after 2003, there came the law of investment. They gave the investors, the developer, a big share, and they encouraged them to do this investment. So this is good if they are going to do something to the city. But what happened, and I showed it here, we didn't have a master plan. Our master plan dated to the 73. There was a master plan to be just approved in the 1990, but there came the occupation of Kuwait and all the Japanese left and the master plan was left. In the 90s, we were asked as a team in the university to do, as Iraqis, to do a master plan, but then it was also not complete, and then came 2003. And in 2007, the World Bank asked a firm, a Lebanese firm, Khatib Alami, you know them, though, to have the new master plan of Baghdad 2030. So they did, but they did they didn't have the vision of what the city should be. And also their contract was very limited. So when we were discussing with them about this vision, and they said, no, we just want to do what we were asked to do. So there was no vision. When there's no vision, you can see what's there will be in the future. So we have this investor want this land. Okay, we will give them this land. Sometimes they took some green areas. Sometimes it was the old airport. So it was it was arbitrary selection of this new investment. You're asking if there is a chance to go back? As I'm an architect and I'm a scholar, I think, yes, we always have this optimistic thought of future because of the new generations. Really, our students, I can see that they are more conscious about this. They want to do something, not like the older one who went through the wars. But according to the insecurity, unfortunately, these new generations are leaving Iraq. They are migrating. You can see that they graduate the same year, or after 2 years, they leave. So, well, maybe there will be some time of chaotic, as you say, but maybe after that, there will be some vision and there will be a continuation. And I still have, as told you in the last slide, hope.
We still have 15 minutes to go, so we can welcome a few more questions from you, or for our online participants, if there were some written on the chat. No, okay. So yes, but to all of you who are listening to us online, if you want, there is. Okay, so we will now give space to one of the participants online.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to meet our teacher, Dr. Ghada Slik, and thank you for all. I will ask, I have a question about the history of Baghdad morphology. I will speak in Arabic.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. بغداد مدينة بغداد قبل before the Abbasic era كانت تتضمن الكثير من الأديرة المسيحية والمباني المهمة.
Can you raise your voice, Mahdi? Can you raise your voice?
Yes.
Yes.
بغداد قبل الخلافة العباسية كانت تتضمن الكثير من الأديرة المسيحية والمباني اللي هي كانت قائمة، واللي هي مثلت حالة الانتقال بين العمارة الآشوري أو العمارة البابلية القديمة اللي هي أو العمارة الفارسية والعمارة العباسية فيما بعد. وهذه الأديرة المسيحية طبعا عكست وظهرت من خلال العديد من العناصر اللي تمثلت بالقلاع والتحصين والانغلاق وغيرها، وبقى لها اثرها فيما بعد في العماره الاسلاميه اللي صارت في مدينه بغداد. البحث يعني اعتقد ما سلط الضوء على هذه الفتره بصوره كافيه، اللي هي الفتره الانتقاليه بين العماره الميزوبوتاميان اركتكتشر اند اباسيك ايرا. وشكرا جزيلا دكتوره غاده، الله يحفظك ان شاء الله.
Thank you. I'll just translate if you want, but I want to translate the
Yes.
question. He's
Yes.
asking about the period before the building of the Abbasid, the Islamic city. He said there was a Christian architecture, and the Christian was continuity to the Mesopotamian architecture in Baghdad. And that era had its influences later on the Islamic architecture. He is saying that I didn't focus on that. Well, I wanted to focus on the modern Baghdad, but I can answer him. Okay. We did some studies and we could find, I said that the whole area of Baghdad was full of monasteries. The whole population, or about 90% population of Iraq, what's known as Iraq now, before Islam was Christian. The Christianity came to Iraq in the 1st century, and then it flourished in the 3rd century. And we had a lot of monasteries in the area of Baghdad. So when we studied, for example, the monasteries, why we have this inward-looking court, we could see that these monasteries, they were not like other geographic areas on mountains. They were in the desert. And a way of protecting them, they had this central space, and they were rounded by the mass. But that was a feature of a monastery. Later on, it became a feature of a khan, or some place to rest those people who travel along the desert. So there was these features, but it wasn't my job, or wasn't my focus here to do the historic influences. But there was one of my students studied the monasteries in Iraq, and we could come of certain influences of the previous, how he showed us or said that is the link between the Mesopotamian and the Islamic era in the, not only in Baghdad, but in the cities of Iraq. Okay, Mahdi?
Thank you
Dr.
very
Mahdi?
much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, shukran jazilan.
You are welcome.
Yes, there are two more, so we will go. And then we'll, because I know we have still one online, so we will go.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting to see this history, how Baghdad was changing. And then I have two questions. So one is from sociological point of view, what was perception of Iraqi people of these changes in architecture? Also, this like for example, what was the reaction for modernism in architecture? Was it perceived as something brand new which we should follow, was it kind of resistance for it? And the second, yeah. And the second question. So I'm ignorant in terms of urbanism, but I believe that traffic, the roads are also important. So I would like to ask about what's the like a typical mode of transport? Is it, we saw one picture with a lot of trams, and so in such a big city, people need to commute somehow. So I guess it should also affect the way how the buildings are provided. So is it like everything is based on mainly on public transport or private ones, and what could be impact of the transport mode for the urbanism in Baghdad?
Well, the second one is very important one, but the first one I'm going to answer. When modernity started in Iraq, I mean, starting from the period after World War II, everything was going modern. The modernity was the target. No, there was no resistance. The whole society was going modern. I showed you buildings modern, clothing modern, even the Arabic traditional poetry modernized, food modernized, the house modernized, everything was going modern. And that was, well, a character of the era. Later on, in the 80s, there was some kind of consciousness that we are losing identity in the city. Also, there was some kind of uprise of national feeling, traditional feeling, some religious feeling. So there was the question of identity again, where we don't want to be lost in modernity or in Western modernity. So this question was a question also for the Iraqi architects, as I showed. How can we build something that is modern, contemporary, going with the demand of the new age, but at the same time, it reflects our identity, it reflects our history. And they did a great job in the 60s and 70s of how to deal with the traditional material with the new buildings, or how to deal with this new multi-story buildings, but at the same time, to protect them weather-wise, or to give them this kind of modernized or modified certain features, like, you know, the arcades or the in the buildings. I didn't show the plan of it, the Mustansariya University. It was how he could bring the courtyard to be splitted to smaller courtyards, but also linked, which separates. There is some kind of like a department in the university, but it is also part of the whole area. So that was an experiment space-wise to how to deal with the court, how to deal with the new arcade as a circulating area. That was an architectural thing. And also in other sides of life, there was also these experiments, how to link. The most successful people were the artists. The artists did great job in I think in in drawings, in sculpture. They did a great job of showing an Iraqi art that is, you can see that is unique of Iraq, but still it's modern. So the second one is, well, there was a plan in the 80s to have a very good public transportation. And there was a plan to have the metro and to have some other public transportation, Slik, but it wasn't implemented because of the war. So the result that we don't have public transportation, we have only small buses, but we have a very difficult situation in the crowdness in the street because we use only the streets, we use only the cars. With such a city with about 10 million people, you can imagine the way the streets are. Those who were in Baghdad can tell you something about the crowdness. So we are now, I mean, not we, I mean, there are certain, the mayoralty of Baghdad is having the new project of the metro again. And we hope it will do something as a public transportation for the city.
Yes, we joked before the lecture about it, that if you want to make a small talk in Poland, you talk about weather. And if you want to make small talk in Baghdad, you always talk about traffic. And this is really true. I saw the last question there. So.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is related to the memory. Let's say you were mentioning all the sites and monuments that were destroyed, like after the period of Abdel Karim Qasim. So are they still pictures and like books that we could, I don't know, records from those buildings that have been destroyed? This is my first question. And the second, because it would be really interesting to learn more about the architecture of Baghdad. Second question is related to the invitation made by the government of the government in the late 50s, like at the beginning of the 60s, to the prominent architects from all over the world. I think that among them was Oscar Niemeyer, and I was wondering if he left something in Baghdad, if there are any buildings of, I mean, I'm not an architect, so I have really little knowledge about that. And أهلا وسهلا فيك.
أهلا بيكي. Okay, thank you. First of all, there was certain features done by Abdel Karim Qasim, which was destroyed by Saddam later on. You saw the unknown soldier monument. And there was also places, certain places that he really changed the use of them and tried to build new things. And there was only the Liberty Monument. And I don't know if you remember, there is this soldier in the middle representing the destruction of the prison. So at that time, when this was being done by the sculptor was working in Italy and coming back to Baghdad to fix things and then go back to Italy. Abdel Karim Qasim wanted his face to be the face of this soldier. So there was a refusal, but they somehow could do that. They didn't do this feature. But during Saddam time, Saddam was told that this face is of Abdel Karim Qasim. And we were just this close to the destruction of this monument. And then came the real story that they avoided it. Somehow the artists could avoid that. So, and there was an area in the Rashid Street where Saddam tried to assassinate Abdel Karim Qasim. So Saddam ran away, but one of his colleagues died. So Saddam made a monumental place called Ghreri because his colleague was named Ghreri and put the sculpture of his colleague there. And then in the turn, against Saddam, this statue was removed and brought the statue of Abdul Karim Qasim instead of it. So it's not only Saddam that wanted to destroy what was done before. Now we have the people now are destroying a lot of things because they say it belonged to Saddam time. The second question, sorry, you can remind me? Oscar Niemeyer did not work in Baghdad. He worked in Lebanon, and he had very nice, beautiful building in Tripoli in Lebanon, but he didn't work in Iraq. There was Gropius, there was Frank Lloyd Wright, who designed a very beautiful opera house for the city of Baghdad, never built, so I didn't show its picture. And it was Le Corbusier who did an Olympic village, but then there was a change in the site and there was the building of the main stadium. And then they said, well, we can build the gymnasium of Le Corbusier. And there was Jose Luis Set, who did the American Embassy, and Gropius, who did the University of Baghdad. There was also Alvarado, who designed an art gallery, but it was not built. There was Dudok, if you have heard of them, he designed the Civic Center, but it was not built. And Philip Hurst from Britain, he did one of the building of the banks.
Okay, I will be very brief, but we have still one question from our Iraqi colleagues online, so we don't want to discriminate them as they cannot be with us. Faten, أهلا وسهلا فيكي. Faten, تفضلي. Is Faten there?
Faten?
افتحي المايك. Can you hear us?
Faten, can you hear us or we cannot hear you?
Okay, so Amal, if not Faten, this will be the
Amal.
last question. Amal.
Okay, Amal.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for organizing this workshop on contemporary growth. Hear me? Sorry? Do you hear my voice?
We
Yes,
hear
I
you.
can.
All good.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Amal, go
Okay,
ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you for organizing this workshop on contemporary growth of architectural in Baghdad. And thank you for Dr. Ghada for this lecture. I have just a question about Dr. Ghada. Through this journey about the development of Baghdad, what the period or which the specific period that if the development of Baghdad continue in the same path, the urban image of the Baghdad different from what we say today, what we see today, sorry. What do you think about this specific period or this time that the development growth to take a different path of what must be go to?
I didn't catch the whole question. Did you catch it? What is the style that you think unique that went in Baghdad?
No, I asked about we see the different stage of development growth of Baghdad, okay? Which the period or the stage, if it continue, the image of urban of Baghdad different and make a right direct or a right path of development of Baghdad, or what's the wrong path that Baghdad take and make be what it is today?
Amal, can you speak in Arabic, please? Because I'm not catching the
Okay.
question. Just in a very brief thing, okay?
اوكي دكتورة، يعني قصدي دكتورة انه شنو خلال هاي الفترات المتتالية من تطور نمو بغداد أي فترة زمنية تحديدا هي اللي بالفعل كانت السبب يعني بمسار تطور بغداد بالاتجاه الخاطئ، أو مثلا لو كانت مستمرة أي فترة، لو كانت مستمرة مثلا لو قلنا إنه الحداثة هي اللي استمرت لكان أصبح صورة مختلفة تماما عما هي اليوم عليه بغداد.
Okay.
فبرأيك
Okay.
نعم دكتور.
Okay. Yes, she's asking about the different periods that went into 20th century in Baghdad and which period that has the continuing influence. And of course, she mentioned modernity. Yes, it is modernity that is continued. But in the 80s, there was some kind of linking modernity with heritage in a very good way, and also in the urban plan way with rehabilitation of certain districts. This is, I mean, linking modernity of the 50s and 60s with what's going on in the 80s, if continued, if not cut by the war or occupation of Kuwait, it would have taken the city to a very good situation. I think this is her question.
Thank
Much.
you, Doctor.
Sorry for the rest. We cannot take more questions because our time is up. So again, thank you very much all for coming and for all the questions, for all the discussion. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture. And yes, we welcome you to our future events if there will be any. No, I think there will be. Thank you. And also very big thanks for our colleagues in Iraq that connected with us online. We also appreciate it a lot to have this Iraqi or Polish connection also for this
Me
event.
too. I like the questions and I like that they enforce the lecture more.